Tonight, done deal. The UK signs a new treaty with Rwanda to try and kickstart its plan to tackle illegal migration. Home Secretary James cleverly insists it will deal with all the issues which led to the Supreme Court declaring it unlawful. So will migrants be sent to Rwanda before the general election? I'll ask the Education Minister, Damian, Hinds, and the SNP's Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn, whose party has called the scheme morally repugnant. Victims of the infected blood scandal call for clarity on compensation payments after MPs defeated the government in the Commons last night, demanding the process be sped up. And here in Westminster tonight, it's the Political Cartoon of the Year Awards. I'll be joined by the winners. All that and much more with Sunder Katwala and Lucia Hodgson, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Now, this isn't a government that's been blessed with good news stories to talk about. I mean, I think even Rishi Sunak would probably acknowledge that. But today there was a genuine piece of positive news. The PISA results are in. Now, they measure global education performance, and England's been moving up the international league tables. There's an important qualification to that, because pretty much across the board, students have been doing worse than pre-COVID, and that includes here. But still, there's a positive narrative you can build here, particularly when the Prime Minister made education a centrepiece of his conference speech with Maths to 18 and a reform of A-levels. So I don't really get why he's not talking about it more, building that story, making that case. Instead, today, when the government could be talking about education, the Home Secretary is in Rwanda. And you know what that means. They're talking about Rwanda again, when 0 flights have taken off so far. And when asked if they will take off before the next election, well, the Home Secretary will only say, the only thing I can guarantee is the effort that we put in. Blimey, not even he sounds confident. So honestly, I don't really get the strategy. I mean, am I missing something? We're going to try and find out on the show tonight. Firstly, though, Sky's Africa correspondent Yusra Al-Bagir has this report from Kigali.
The first of its kind to ever be signed. A 43-page internationally binding treaty between the UK and Rwandan governments to formalise the deportation of asylum seekers to Kigali.
We do this despite the fact that it is difficult and sensitive, because if we don't address these issues, the people that will ultimately be the winners are the people smugglers. They are the slave traders. They are the criminal gangs, and they are the extremist voices who always take advantage of human difficulties and hardship.
This move comes after the UK Supreme Court deemed the plan unlawful and judged Rwanda to be unsafe for asylum seekers who cannot risk being sent back home.
How did we go from model to dangerous country in just 4 short years? And how much of this perception is linked to internal UK politics? This being said, I would say that there is always a room for improvement to any system designed by human beings.
This is a last-ditch effort by the UK government to stop the boats and deter illegal migration. But almost 29,000 migrants have crossed the Channel into the UK this year alone, already surpassing the numbers of those who crossed in 2021, the year before the deal was announced.
Well, we intend to stop the boats as quickly as possible. I'm not going to set a deadline. I want to do it straight away. I want to do it as soon as possible. That's why we're working with real energy here in Rwanda.
James Cleverly is the third UK Home Secretary to visit Kigali since April 2022. But not a single asylum seeker has made the trip from the UK as part of the deal. Hope Hostel, their designated accommodation, has been standing empty for at least 18 months. And costs have increased from £120 million to at least £140 million. What do you think of this deal between the UK and Rwanda to send asylum seekers here?
It's a good thing because it's going to promote the relationship between countries.
So as a Rwandan, if you had to choose between living in the UK and Rwanda, what would you choose?
According to me, I can choose to live in the UK. Yeah, because there is some development. There's some different activities more than in Rwanda. But in Rwanda, there's some peace.
The partnership has been signed and sealed with a hug, an easy agreement between two beneficiaries. But now to the constant stumbling block, getting it passed on UK soil. Yusra Bagher, Sky News, Kigali.
Yusra Bagher there, reporting from Kigali in Rwanda. Let's listen to what the government have to say on that, shall we? There was someone who wanted to talk about those PISA results I mentioned at the beginning of the programme, Schools Minister Damian Hinds. Now, they're a comparison of education standards for 81 countries around the world. And England, which his department covers, was rated significantly above the average for maths, reading and science. But I did, of course, start inevitably asking about Rwanda. Thank you so much for being on the programme. I'm keen to talk about your brief and about the PISA announcements today. But just first to talk about Rwanda, where the Home Secretary is. How personally comfortable are you with the thought of sending asylum seekers who may have legitimate claims to Rwanda?
I think it is important to treat everybody with respect. Rwanda is a safe country, and I think there could be good opportunities actually for people going to that country. It's right, of course, the British government looks at the judgment from the Supreme Court and addresses the issues that it found, and that's what's going on. That's what's happening with work the Home Secretary is doing and work others are doing with their counterparts in Kigali.
You're an ally of the former Prime Minister Theresa May. She said she's against it on the grounds of legality, practicality and efficacy. Is she right?
Look, I think it is an important programme. It's an important part. It's not the only part, but an important part of what we're doing to address illegal immigration and get the asylum seeking process working in a good way. There are these issues to be addressed that the Supreme Court addressed, and it's right to work on them. And then, of course, government will come forward with more in terms of legislation, the treaty, and so on in due course.
I mean, is it even going to work? Robert Jenrick told me he says that yes, flights are going to take off before the next election. The Home Secretary said the only thing I can guarantee is the effort that we put in.
Well, I don't see there is no reason why it should not work. We've got a good, strong relationship.
It might get held up in the courts.
We've got a good, strong relationship with the government in Kigali. There's the accommodation there. We know there are economic opportunities actually in a growing country like Rwanda. There are also these things that have to be got over, and that's what government is working on with the government of Rwanda.
Are you a little bit annoyed that this is a big day for you? You've got the PISA results, you've got a good story to tell on education, and this is the day that the Home Secretary decides to fly out to Rwanda to talk about something that hasn't even happened yet, and we don't even know if it is going to happen. No one's actually gone to Rwanda.
No, not in the slightest. Government is a busy activity. There's always lots of things going on in any one day. But I am glad.
You don't want me to be talking about Rwanda, do you?
Sophie, I'm glad you mentioned the PISA results, because that gives me a chance to say that this is a very positive story. Actually, a lot of congratulations are due to our teachers and to our pupils who, in difficult circumstances, have delivered a really strong set of results in these international comparisons. It is true that COVID has dealt a blow to everybody. Actually, almost every country in the world has had education set back somewhat because of COVID. But in that context, our setback has been somewhat less than the average, and we have improved our ranking relative to other countries. And as I say, that should be a source of cause for celebration and commendation of everyone working in our schools, and of course the children and the families who are doing it. You
say it's a cause for celebration. At the same time, though, the numbers have still gone down, right? As you acknowledge, in English, maths and science.
As they have in every country.
492 in 2022. Yeah. That's down from 504 in 2018. Reading, 496 in 2022, down from 505 in 2018. Science, 503 in 2022. That's down from 507 in 2022.
Yeah, it's
not something to be celebrated, right?
Well, COVID isn't something to be celebrated. Clearly, quite the reverse. In so many different ways for our society, many other societies, it's been terrible, and it's also been a knockback for education. We knew that already. What these results today tell us is about the relative performance of the education system, schools, teachers in England compared to other countries, actually compared to the other home nations as well, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, but also to countries right across the world. And we are able to say that the loss, and there has been loss, but the loss has been lesser in this country, in England, than it has been on average across those other places, and we have performed well.
We're going to be talking to Stephen Flynn, the SNP leader, leader in Westminster, I should say, a bit later on the programme. Scotland, as you say, hasn't performed as well as England. Do you think that politicians in Scotland should look at the curriculum in Scotland? Because some people would say that the reason that England has done quite well here is because of the focus on things like phonics.
Well, I do think, actually, that our focus on things like phonics and also maths mastery has made a huge difference. Top of the list, of course, and what makes a difference in education in schools is teachers, and that will continue to be the case.
So what about the Scottish curriculum?
But the things that go with them, and there are also great teachers, of course, in Scotland, and there are in Wales, and that's the point about system reform, curriculum, pedagogies, methods of teaching, what is tested and when. All of these things form a system that works with teachers, and we have reformed that system very significantly since 2010 with things like phonics, with things like maths mastery, with things like making sure we got a multiplication, times tables checks in primary school, with a more stretching GCSE. All of these things have been important. And yes, I would encourage, I want children throughout the United Kingdom to be doing just as well as they possibly can be. They are working hard, and it's right that the system should be supporting them and their teachers to absolutely do as well as they can.
So you would encourage what's the end of the sentence?
I would encourage my colleagues, it's not so much not only people in government, but including people in government in Scotland, in Wales. Of course, they should look at what has happened here in England and should see what they can take from that. But there are also other countries. There should be no pride in this, or shame in this, if you like. We've looked at other countries across the world. We looked at East Asian countries, Singapore, the Shanghai province in China, how they were doing particularly well in mathematics. And we said, well, what is it that they are doing? And could we emulate that? Can we learn from that? And we've been...
I'm going to take you to Israel, where the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is speaking with an update on the Israel-Hamas war. Let's listen.
And today, as they did in the past, they are fighting with tremendous determination and utmost heroism. And today, as in the past, we will pray together for their safety and for the safety and security of our country. And you shall bring great salvation to your people, the people of Israel. Citizens of Israel, I and the cabinet members met with the families of the hostages today, the hostages that have been released already and the ones that we're doing everything we can to bring back home. And I've heard heart-wrenching stories about the thirst, the hunger, about mental and physical abuse, these little children who are still whispering out of fear, and the great darkness in which their loved ones are still in. And I heard, and you've also heard, about sexual abuse and some vicious rapes. But I must say that until just a few days ago, I haven't heard anything from human rights organizations. I didn't hear women's organizations. I didn't hear anything from women organizations in the UN. I did not hear their outcry, so I say to them, where are you? Did you remain silent because these are Jewish women? I would like to say this in a language that everybody understands.
To the human rights organizations, you've heard of the rape of Israeli women? Horrible atrocities, sexual mutilation? Where the hell are you? I expect all civilized leaders, governments, nations to speak up against this atrocity. אני שותף מלא
I fully share the profound concern of the families whose loved ones are still being kept in Gaza. I understand the uncertainty. I understand this intolerable difficulty. And I've said to the families that we are not sparing any effort to bring back their loved ones, bringing back all of our hostages home. This is one of the big targets, the three main targets of the war. We are checking and verifying every piece of information discussion, I'd like you to know that there is a huge, tremendous intel endeavor that's focusing only on that. Around the clock, we are working with responsibility and discretion in order to bring all of our hostages back home safely. And when I say all of them, I'm referring to soldiers, both men and women, civilians, young and old, everyone, without exception. And in every decision we make, we are always considering this goal of bringing back the hostages, and we are on the right path. Today, I saw Emilia Aloni, little 6-year-old Emilia Aloni, going back to kindergarten, and her friends embraced her, her kindergarten teacher embraced her, and for one short moment in these dark days, the heart is filled up with happiness, and that's quite a lot in such a day and age. And we've managed to bring back home 110 hostages through the combination of a very lethal military effort as well as an ongoing diplomatic one. And I'd like to tell you, this is the only way to bring back the hostages that are still held in captivity by Hamas. We are committed to do so. Hamas tried to break us apart, but we are breaking it apart. Many of the murderers came from the Sajaiya battalion. They broke through the fence and entered into Israel and committed their atrocities. And this is why we targeted and killed the commander of this battalion at the beginning of this week. He commanded these atrocious murders.
That was the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu giving an update on the war, saying that they are working to bring hostages back home safely. He also spoke specifically about some of the sexual violence that's been in the war, criticising what he sees as a lack of outcry from human rights organisations, including the UN. At one point, he said in English, "You heard of the rape of Israeli women. Where are you?" Asking, is it because these are Jewish women? We'll, of course, bring you any more updates from Israel as we get them. To return to the story that we're covering tonight on Rwanda, in a moment we will speak to Yusra Al-Bagir, who's in Kigali for us. But first, let's talk to Sky's political editor, Beth Rigby, shall we? Home Secretary in Rwanda. The government obviously keen to talk about it. They've chosen to make the trip. But is it a win for them politically?
Well, I think the thing is, it's not really the Rwanda signing of that treaty that will be the moment in all of this. It's what's going to happen with the domestic legislation. If you think of what the government are doing this week, immigration plan in 3 parts. Day one, on Monday, you got the trying to bring down net migration by legal routes. Then the Home Secretary flies to Kigali to sign the treaty, to try and answer some of the Supreme Court's concerns. Whether it will is a moot point, but that's the aim. But it's the legislation, Sophie. And what's unclear tonight is what will be in it. As I understand it, the substance still being decided. But what is clear is whatever is in it is going to be controversial. And this is a Prime Minister that made a pledge in January to stop the small boats. He promised when the Supreme Court rejected the Rwanda, the attempts by the government to get planes off to Rwanda, he made a promise those planes would go next spring. And now he has an almighty battle on his hand to not just get it through both houses of Parliament, but get it passed through the courts and then his parliamentary party. And really, all eyes here are on the splits in the party. And my goodness, they are public. Now, you know and I know, normally these discussions happen behind closed doors. On both wings of the party now, people are making public calls to the Prime Minister about what he should do. So tonight we have seen the One Nation group, that's the centre ground of the Conservatives, the mainstream Conservatives, as they would describe themselves, saying, do not pull out of the Human Rights Convention, do not pull out of our international obligations on human rights. One of them, Stephen Hammond, saying that moderate and mainstream Conservatives may struggle to support that sort of legislation. So a clear warning shot, and reminding the Prime Minister there's 106 MPs in that group. That's one side. We also tonight have the right-wing MPs, that's the New Conservatives, the ERG, the Brexiteer group, and the Common Sense group, some of that group all meeting as well to insist that the government must pull out of human rights legislation, or rather disapply it to this particular bill in order, they think, to get it through the courts and see off challenges, legal challenges, and you've got a Prime Minister in Downing Street in the middle saying, I can't, whatever I do, I'm going to blow up one wing of my party. And he's looking in the rearview mirror from last night of his first parliamentary defeat on an unrelated bill, but a defeat in the Commons. And I think that they are jittery. And the reason that I say that, Sophie, is that at the beginning of the week we were saying, well, Monday you have the legal route clamped down. Tuesday he goes to Rwanda. Thursday Wednesday you publish the bill or you lay the bill. Thursday you debate it and off we go because they've got a time pressure. And now it's unclear whether it's come in. Some people suggesting to me that maybe the bill needs to be published and then a bit of time for MPs to digest it. But either which way, it's a Prime Minister with a massive headache, not just in terms of the policy and being able to deliver that for voters, but how he holds together a party when I would say his authority is clearly on the wane.
Yeah, and as you say, that guarantee he can get stuff through after last night, really not clear at all.
You've got massive divisions on either side.
Beth, thank you very much indeed. Beth Rippey there on the politics. Well, let's talk to Yusra now, shall we, who is in Kigali. How's the day been?
It's been a long day, but it also was one that started a couple of hours later than we expected. James Cleverly and his team didn't arrive until 9:30 local, 7:30 UK time. We were expecting him around 7 a.m. But when he did arrive, he went straight to the Genocide Memorial Museum in Kigali, took a tour, got to know the history of Rwanda. And there was also a lot of talk about refugees, that the country has a history of not only having refugees, but also receiving refugees. And that kind of started the day. From there, they went off to private meetings at the embassy, and we later all convened at the Foreign Ministry for this grand signing. It was actually quite minimal, to be fair. There wasn't that much of a fuss. It was James Cleverly and Dr. Vincent Biruta, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, and together they signed this 43-page legally binding international treaty that takes the memorandum of understanding that they shared further and goes into particulars around protocol, around an appeal body, things that will essentially allay concerns around asylum seekers being sent back to their home countries, as detailed by the UK Supreme Court as a key around this plan being deemed unlawful.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Yusra El-Bagir there in Kigali for us. Well, let's speak now, shall we, to the leader of the SNP in Westminster, that's Stephen Flynn. James Cleverly in Rwanda, what do you make of this scheme?
I despair, if I'm honest. You know, the government's spoken about Rwanda now for, 18 months or so. It's not yielded any tangible benefits for anyone. They've spent the best part of, £140 million. We don't know how much more they're going to spend on this. You know, there's an easy solution. You create safe and legal routes and you invest in more staff to clear the backlog. The reason they don't want to do that is they want to create a culture war over some of the most marginalised and vulnerable people, not just in the UK, but on the planet. It's all just a bit despicable, and I'm frankly fed up of it, and I think most of the viewers probably will be too.
I guess the government would say this is about trying to put people off making the application in the first place, right? And so many people would say, look, the boats are still coming, it's dangerous for people on them, surely something must be done to try and prevent people making that crossing.
Yeah, and the solution to that is to create safe and legal routes so that you can deal with this problem if it is indeed perceived as a problem at source.
Would that mean that every country in the world would have a safe and legal route to claim asylum in the UK?
I think there's an expectation that the UK should be engaging with partners right across the world to try and lessen the impact on these people. Mm-hmm. And if you can do that in collaboration with others, you should. You know, this plan was botched up by Boris Johnson to try and distract from all the problems that exist. It's not solved anything. It's not going to fix the problem if indeed people perceive there to be a problem. Let's get safe and legal routes and let's make sure we clear the backlog by investing in staff.
I know it's very important to make sure it's clear when we're talking about legal and illegal migration, but we've been talking an awful lot about legal migration as well recently. Does Scotland need more migration?
Absolutely. And, you know, the statement that the Home Secretary gave yesterday, for me, was absurd. It was ignorant and it's going to lead to economic damage. And that's because of the fact that we know that migrants contribute more to the Treasury than they take out. We know that for every 1% increase in the workforce that's made up of migrants, we see a commensurate 1.2% to 3% increase in productivity. And having more people of working age in the economy is a good thing. Scotland has not just an ageing population, but has a declining population and a declining working age population. We need migrants in Scotland. It's economically beneficial to us. For our public services, it's good, and socially and culturally it enriches us.
What would be the right level of migration then, of net migration?
So what I would like to see is an evidence-based approach which looks at the economic situation that we face, that we also take into account the needs of our public sector, which of course is heavily reliant upon migrant workers, our care sector, our hospitals and indeed our schools, and we make sure that we have a system which is built around that.
OK, so taking all that into account now, what would be the correct level of net migration?
Well, for Scotland, I don't think it's for me to put in place an arbitrary target for hypothetical at this moment in time, but what I would like to see is greater migration to Scotland. I think that would be a good thing. It would help our public services, it would help our economy, and most importantly of all, it would enrich our communities. And I think for most people in Scotland, they would agree with that, and the numbers would back that up.
It's interesting you talk about enriching communities. Do you think that's part of the debate then?
I think there's been an overriding sense of denial in relation to the benefits of migration for a long time. I think it fueled Brexit.
Do you think it's a bit racist in a way?
I think it wouldn't be for me to suggest what other people's views may be in relation to migrants coming over, but there's definitely a distrust and a lot of misinformation about migrants. I'm proudly in favour of increased migration, and I wish that other politicians, both in the Conservative Party and indeed in the Labour leadership, agreed. I
want to talk to you about education, because we had the PISA results out today that measures worldwide education standards, looking at 700,000 15-year-olds. Look, there'll always be criticism of different methods, but this is seen as a very important piece of work. And the report shows a long-term decline in standards in Scotland. Kids in Scotland lagging behind kids in England, particularly in maths and science. Does the SNP take responsibility for that?
So of course, the decline in Scottish education, if indeed there is one which the figures would indicate there's a problem in that regard, much predates the Scottish National Party. Indeed, it goes back to the Labour and Lib Dem coalition, which was before us. So we obviously have a structural problem within
on your watch as well. It's not like the SNP came to power in Scotland, like, a couple of months ago.
Obviously. And, every effort is being made to improve educational attainment in Scotland. Of course, across these isles is a mixed picture. I think that in relation to some of our comparators with England, we may well be behind, but in relation to Wales, we may well be in front.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't be looking at it in that perspective. I think what we should be doing is...
Would you like to apologise to parents who might feel a bit let down if they look at this?
I think what we should be doing is focusing on making sure that kids have the best opportunities in life. In Scotland, we have an education system that we're proud of, our world-leading. 5 of the top 20 universities in the world are in Scotland. We have free higher education for university as well. In stark contrast, elsewhere on these isles, 95% of young people in Scotland go to positive destinations. So that is a good story as well.
Some people say part of the issue is with the curriculum in Scotland. Like, here's Lindsay Patterson, the Professor of Education Policy at Edinburgh University. He says the decline corresponds with the implementation of the curriculum for excellence introduced by the SNP. The longer-term decline may be seen clearly for Scotland if we go back a full decade to 2012. 2012 is around the time that the Scottish Curriculum for Excellence was beginning to impinge significantly on children's learning. Should you scrap it?
Well, of course, it's my understanding that it predates the introduction of the Curriculum for Excellence, and I think we need to reflect on that and be a little bit cautious about the figures that are and the dates that are getting thrown around here.
That's a decade. It's a decade.
But of course, as it stands, 95...
You can't blame it on stuff that happened over a decade ago.
And I'll talk about what's happening now. 95% of young people in Scotland go on to positive destinations. So that means they go on to work, it means they go to college, it means they go to apprenticeships, it means they go to university, which of course in Scotland for young Scots is free. That's a positive thing. 95% of young people go into positive destinations. That's something that we should be proud of. It's something I'm very proud of. Of course, there's much more work to be done and we're all committed to that. But meantime, I think we're doing as well as we possibly can.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Stephen Flynn there. And of course, the Rwanda plan that we've been talking about, sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the former leader of Scottish Labour, now director at the John Smith Centre at Glasgow University, Kezia Dugdale, and the deputy editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Right, let's pick up, shall we, with our guests for this evening, the author and director of British Future, Sunder Katwala, and the former Conservative Special Advisor, Lucia Hodgson. Great to have you both. Good evening. Lucy, can you help me out here when it comes to strategy? and what Rishi Sunak is trying to do with Rwanda. Is it the right strategy, you think?
I think they're so far down the road of this strategy that it would be probably unwise to start thinking about other options at this point. And I think there's probably a benefit to demonstrating a real drive and commitment to getting this over the line. And I suspect that today will feel like some progress towards that. I think it's becoming an kind of obvious play for the election that if they get this right, if by spring there are flights that have taken off, this will feel like the sort of boost that they have wanted and need. So I think that they're clearly putting their sort of energy into making this work, with a hope that becomes the election strategy. I think being able to point to progress where perhaps clutching kind of victory from the jaws of defeat does become the strategy that they pursue.
And you've got your kind of campaigning stripes, if you like, whether it's Brexit, whether it's kind of Boris Johnson. Are there a particular kind of group of voters you think that they are targeting here with this strategy?
I mean, I think there's no doubt that, in focus groups that kind of we're talking to at the moment with Charlesby, and I'm sure the sort of polling and insight that Number 10 are looking at shows that this is very much a concern for voters. I think it's increasingly a concern with given kind of the numbers and where we are. And I think that they've decided that that's something that they will tap into, and probably feel that they have a narrative where I think they may find that Labour are kind of struggling to develop what they would like to do.
What's your take on where the kind of polling is, where the kind of public mood is on this?
I think the one thing people agree on, people disagree about the principle of if you come uninvited, should you have your asylum claim heard. Labour supporters think you should, Conservative supporters think you don't. The thing people agree on now is 3/4 of people think the Rwanda plan isn't going to happen. And there's only a 1 in a million chance, I would say, that there are planes in the spring. And
so you think 1 in a million chance?
It can't now happen. Everyone in Downing Street, everyone in the Home Office knows it can't happen. What they need to do is show that they tried. And if they show that they still tried, and if the dividing line wasn't with your own MPs or with the House of Lords, but the dividing line was with the Labour Party and the judges and the NGOs, then you could say, well, if we won the election, it could still happen, but we weren't stopped. That's where we are now, because if you can have the treaty, and then you can have the legislation, and then you're in the court case. It took 16 months last time. But if you can't pass a bill through the House of Lords that disapplies every treaty and ignores every court, then you've got to persuade the UK Supreme Court that Rwanda is safe, and that's a high bar. I was wondering what Dr. Vincent Biruta made of it all. He's the Rwandan Foreign Minister. He's been there 4 years. This is his annual tradition now, where he gets a new British Home Secretary, signs a memorandum, he signs another memorandum, he's been upgraded to a treaty. I mean, it's lucrative work. He's £150 million up on the deal. He's very disappointed with the Supreme Court. But he really damaged James Cleverly's case today in the press conference, because he said, well, your court, maybe that's just British politics. And the UK government's position is the court is serious and the treaty will fix it. And the Rwandan government's position is that's just playing politics with Rwanda. It's not true. And what the Supreme Court says is until it's a serious admission of the problem, you can't get a culture that can fix it. So in the end, it will be in court. It will be a dividing line at the election. And one day, you may or may not do it after the election. There were 30,000 people who've come. And you're going to have to put them in the asylum system. And maybe these pictures of press conferences and treaties are a way of avoiding admitting something really difficult to admit.
Just to go back to that point on trying to get something done and not getting it over the line, I mean, I wonder if Number 10 are looking at the last election, which was on the basis of trying to get something done and not getting it over the line, and being able to say to the electorate, we want to be able to do this. Are you with us on this issue or not?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they have a very long way to go in the polls to feel that they're catching up with Labour, but the last election was, that single issue election of Brexit.
We need to get Brexit done. Yeah. If you vote for us, we'll get it over the line. Interesting.
That may be on their mind.
You can see that happening. Thank you both very much. Interesting discussion from Sunder and Lucia. Thank you. Still to come on the Politics Hub. Junior doctors vote to stage the longest strike in NHS history after pay talks collapse.
Today Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Hello, welcome back. Now, I want to talk to you about the infected blood scandal. It's where thousands of people in the 70s and 80s were giving contaminated blood, and around half of them have already died. Now, last night in the House of Commons, MPs voted against the government and in favour of a new compensation scheme, and today campaigners were in Downing Street calling for faster action. Sky correspondent Amelia Harper reports.
Why can't they deliver justice on this when people have been waiting for decades?
For years, they felt unheard. Now, victims of the NHS infected blood scandal say no more. Thousands died after being treated with contaminated blood products in the 1970s and 80s. Among the survivors, Suresh, treated for haemophilia.
I was given some contaminated blood products from the government, and with that I got HIV, hepatitis C, VCJD and the hepatitis A and B. So with that, my life's been kind of turned upside down. Upon doctor's advice, we were asked to sort of abort our baby, and it took away the chance of being a parent.
The nose to the left. 242.
Campaigners took to the streets after MPs backed plans for a new body to administer a compensation scheme following a rebellion by Tory MPs. Survivors and bereaved partners have already received interim payments of £100,000 as part of the ongoing public inquiry, but for them it's far from the end of the road.
We've been here for 5 decades and we still haven't reached the end line. I don't know when that's going to be. So it's a bittersweet moment, really.
People here want their voices heard today. For victims and their families, they say for decades they've been overlooked and compensation has come far too late. Handing a letter to Downing Street, survivors and their families urged the government to extend compensation to the parents and children of victims and to deliver this new body without delay. They were supported by the Labour MP responsible for the vote in Parliament.
It sends a really clear message to government. They can't keep coming to Parliament and saying we're working on it, we're working at pace, it's all very difficult. You can put a man on the moon. Surely we can get this sorted out.
Earlier this year, the chair of the public inquiry criticised the government for not acting sooner.
If it troubles my conscience, I would think it would trouble the conscience of a caring government.
And it's this that victims and their families say are missing, according to one lawyer representing some 1,500 of those affected.
People are not simply looking for money, they're looking for recognition, they're looking for an explanation as to how this could have happened and how successive governments could have lied about it for 50 years.
In what's widely regarded as the biggest scandal in NHS history, it's taken years to get to this point. And for those here, it's just the start of many more. Amelia Harper, Sky News.
Well, let's talk to Sky's deputy political editor, Sam Coates, shall we? Sam, it's an awful story. Like, the more I kind of read into it, the more shocking I find it, to be completely honest. But I just want to talk to you about the fact that the government lost the vote on it. What does that tell us?
You're right, it's an incredible story. So much of the hard work, by the way, done by Caroline Wheeler of the Sunday Times, who deserves a special mention for campaigning journalism of the sort that you don't always see. But for me, as a political journalist, huge importance. I think this is the most important political story of the day that you haven't even talked about in the first 40 minutes of the show.
I'm not sure about this, Sam. Is this allowed?
But here's why. Rishi Sunak's government has suffered a defeat. It has now been proved that it cannot carry the House of Commons. And twice last night, there were huge rebellions. Now, this defeat took place because 22 Tory MPs voted against the government with all the opposition to do something that the government say they agree with the opposition on. It's just a question of timing. So it really was quite an act of defiance. And then an hour later, there was another rebellion by 26 Tory MPs. And that was about draft emissions and congestion charging, again, defying the government. Three-line whip. All Tory MPs were compelled under a three-line whip to vote yesterday. And the two groups of rebellions, according to Phil Cowley, who's a political expert in these things, largely different. So you've got up to 90 MPs, if you add in the abstentions, just sitting on their hands when Rishi Sunak's team is ordering them into the division lobbies. Now, these two issues in political terms are disparate and are not high on the political agenda, however important they are. But that you have 90 Tories at this point defying the government is massive, when it only takes 29 for the government to be defeated, given the scale of its majority.
It's interesting. I was talking to someone about this and about, letters going in, letters of no confidence that, of course, can trigger a change in Prime Minister and leader. And they were saying, no, don't worry about that. That's not the story. No. An election could be triggered if the government just can't get the stuff through, if they lose control of their MPs. And do you think we could even be seeing the first signs of that?
100%, Sophie. Absolutely. Look, we're back to the legislation on human rights that you were talking about earlier with Beth. There is a conversation going on amongst Tory MPs about whether or not to join forces with the opposition on what's known as second or third reading if they really don't like the legislation and vote the government down. I mean, really, we are in potentially election territory if a bunch of rebels vote down government legislation. Is it likely to happen? Well, everyone looks at the polls. The Tories aren't ready to go to the country if they're 20, 21 points behind. It would be madness. But remember, when thinking about rebellions, 50 Tory MPs have already said they're standing down. Many of them think that the Conservative Party needs to find its soul even more than it needs to govern for a few more months. Different people have different rationales. It might sound irrational for Tory MPs to vote for, like turkeys for Christmas, but actually a lot of people have lots of different motivations right now. I wouldn't bet on the time of the election totally being in Rishi Sunak's hands.
So interesting. Sam, thank you very much indeed. Sam Coates there. Now, another big story today. Junior doctors asked to go on strike again just before Christmas and again in January. Now, the strike in January is 6 full days, thought to be the longest single period of industrial action in the history of the NHS. The British Medical Association said the additional 3% pay offer, which would have been on top of the average 8.8% increase given in the summer, was spread unevenly across doctors' grades, so still amounted to a pay cut for many doctors. Well, Sky correspondent Alice Porter joins us now. Alice, what's being planned?
Well, it's going to be a really difficult time for people wanting medical treatment over the Christmas period because despite 5 weeks of negotiations and discussions between the BMA and the government, unfortunately, we've heard that the strike dates that have been agreed are just before Christmas on the 20th of December for 3 days and then again in the new year on the 3rd of January, and that will go on for 6 days. And look, this has been a long-running dispute with the BMA that has been going on since March. We've had multiple strikes. And I think what's really concerning is there seems to be no resolution. The BMA junior doctors were awarded an 8.8% pay rise this year. The government put forward 3%, but the BMA are saying that's not credible. And on top of the 8.8% that they received, they want an additional 26% 8%. So there seems to be an enormous gulf between what they're asking for and what the government are offering, and at the middle of that is very much patients caught up in it. And I think that the particular worry is the strike at the beginning of the new year, because that week is one of the times in the NHS where we see enormous pressures, those winter pressures that we see every year. But of course, after Christmas is a time where we have reduced staff, of people taking holiday. And so the worry is about, particularly in the new year, how patients will be caught up in the middle of this.
Thank you very much indeed. Still to come on the Politics Hub. Cruel or comical? Perhaps the best ones are a little bit of both. We're talking political cartoons. That's next. Hello, welcome back. Now, I absolutely love a good political cartoon. Never has the saying, a picture tells 1,000 words, been more true. And most politicians actually say they don't mind being drawn, even though the cartoons are usually less than flattering. They're even known to request drawings of themselves to hang on their toilet walls. Well, tonight is the Political Cartoon of the Year Awards, and I spoke to the cartoonists Patrick Blower and Christian Adams, plus Tim Benson from the Political Cartoon Gallery. Great to have you guys here. I'm a big fan of the political cartoon, I have to say. Always love a good political cartoon. Tim, what's the idea of the awards then?
Well, the awards have been running for 23 years. And the thing about political cartoons is that this country probably has the greatest heritage in the world. And I produce a book called Britain's Best Political Cartoons every year. And there's no other country that has the depth of talent that could actually, that I could do that book in. So the awards have been going for, I said, 23 years. And every year we have a prominent politician come along and present the awards. That is the Cartoonist of the Year and the Cartoon of the Year.
And we've got some of the winners here with us in the studio, lucky for us. Christian, congratulations on your award win. This is one of yours, right?
Yes.
Rishi Sunak, Rishi as Barbie.
Yes.
So talk us through this.
It was the gift that every cartoonist wants. It's we love joining two stories, usually political, with a cultural event, like a film poster or something like that. And Barbie, I mean, the Prime Minister was in economic trouble, as usual. I mean, that was an ongoing problem. But Barbie was the biggest cultural event of the year. And it was a gift that I couldn't, refuse. And the cherry on the cake was their names a little bit similar, Barbie and Rishi. So that's
too much.
It's just great.
And this one, the political...
This one, the political cartoon of the year.
Yes, political cartoon of the year. And Patrick, talk to us about your cartoon that you chose.
Well, I suppose this was a big meeting between Xi Jinping and Putin. Two people who we can definitely call the baddies, in a sort of Manichaean world. There are goodies and baddies, they're definitely baddies. I love cartoons where there's no words, ideally. And I wanted to sum up a situation just in their body language. No words, simple picture. And I think this conveys kind of everything I wanted to say about the relationship between these two. The sort of mad, macho man, Putin, who's ultimately completely subservient to the real player.
The real player in the race.
And to me, that just kind of summed up how I felt about it, with no caption.
How long does it take to make a cartoon?
Well, I've got a very different job to Patrick because I work for the Evening Standard and my deadline is 11 o'clock in the morning.
Blimey, so not quick then, yeah?
Yes, and Patrick works for the next day's issue. So it's just because it's an evening newspaper, so I have 5-6 hours to do it.
And is it done on computer? Sorry, I'm so ignorant on this stuff. Is it like, pen and paper? Is it paint? Is it what kind of medium?
Well, every cartoonist works differently.
Yeah.
Patrick will tell you completely. He works completely differently to me.
Yeah.
I do ink first, like old-fashioned scratch sheet on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And then I Photoshop colours in.
Yeah.
And Patrick works completely differently.
How do you do that?
Well, I do an old-fashioned bit, because I go for a long walk in the morning after I've read the news and just mull it over. I mean, my deadline is leisurely compared to Christian's, because I have all day. But I go for a long walk, mull the news over in my head, come up with roughs on a pen and paper, email them to my editor. And then at lunchtime, I get onto a tablet and I draw on one of these graphic tablets.
That's so interesting.
And I use layers and it's way quicker. I quite often have to make corrections.
Yeah.
And the old days of using Tipp-Ex to paint over things can't be done with that anymore.
That's all
so with computers, it's amazing. You can change any aspect of saying, well, I need Putin to the right a bit, or I need to make that flag bigger.
You can do it.
It's a cinch. And I've got so used to
that. You mentioned, Tim, that you always have a political speaker.
Yes.
Suella Braverman.
Wonderful.
I mean, there's been a lot of cartoons of her, haven't there, recently?
There have. I think we've got some here tonight.
Look at some, hopefully.
Yes.
There, this one
there
here.
we are. That's,
here we go. This is
Peter
the...
Brooks.
So good you showed it twice.
Yeah.
Yes.
How do you think she's going to take it? Do you think she's going to make any reference to some of these cartoons? I mean, they're not the most complimentary, are they?
No, but it shows her importance. Well, Churchill said the problem was that when politicians, they start to worry when they stop appearing in cartoons rather than when they do. So it does show a politician's importance of when they appear.
It's the kind of thing you get framed in your downstairs loo, right?
Yes, absolutely.
The best/worst political cartoon of yourself, and you made it as a politician. I'm going to let you guys go because I know you have to hot-foot it to the actual awards ceremony. I don't want to eat in to your important pub time. So thank you very much for coming to the programme.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Another winners of the Elwood Attfield Political Cartoon of the Year Awards there. Well, let's pick up with Sunder and Lucia, shall we? I love a political cartoon.
So good. The Rishi one, the In-Action Man.
The Barbie
so
one,
good.
Yeah, it's very good.
Very smart.
Very good. Any particular favourite cartoons over the years, or...?
Yeah, they used to be really important. I'm sure they still are. The gallery's really, really brilliant. But there still are books of them. And so on. I mean, some politicians are a real godsend, aren't they? Thatcher, Blair Brown. I think Boris Johnson is just the cartoonist dream. And then some of them are a bit tricky, actually. And I think the one politician no cartoonists really got their handle on yet is Keir Starmer. Sort of bloke in suit. What can we do? He might be here for some years to come. We need to kind of create an idea of what the caricaturable bit is.
What was did Boris Johnson take the cartoons quite well? There's quite a lot of him over the years.
I'm not sure he had a particular opinion on those, but I think the hair definitely lends itself to a good cartoon. But I'm not sure whether you know that in Number 11, when you go up the stairs, obviously there's sort of frames and paintings everywhere in Downing Street, but the stairs up to Number 11, they have framed a lot of the cartoons and the caricatures. Yeah, so chancellors over the years. So they definitely have a really kind of important part to play, I think, in kind of how we remember things.
What are the pictures like that they've chosen on the way to Number 11? Have they gone for like the really insulting ones, or are they slightly more flattering?
There's definitely some kind of ones that are poking fun at them. So I think it's all in good humour, and I think a bit like you said, you can say so much in a cartoon that you possibly couldn't even get through in 1,000 words sometimes.
Yeah, that's totally right. That's much more interesting than the kind of Number 10 stairs. That's the ones that I've actually been on, which has just got the kind of like classic pictures of all the prime ministers.
The very serious ones, and then down the other corridor is the much more kind of
the kind of naughty, irreverent
space, aren't they? They're going to have to not have all the
in recent years, they're like, hang on, guys, like, yeah, exactly.
Shove them along.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it was a few years ago, there was a Trog exhibition at the Cartoon Museum in Bloomsbury, and I think some of that stuff was just unbelievable, sort of the Blair one, the Hand of History on my shoulder stuff that just, again, like, I think the talent and the imagination that goes into kind of being able to put across those messages.
Now, before we go, I do want to bring you this. We've done a bit of Christmas lights in the programme before, but today the Christmas tree lights were turned on at Parliament. It didn't go according to plan, though. Have a look at what happened.
3, 2, 1...
There is a metaphor there somewhere, I think.
Something just says a hung Parliament's quite good. Maybe that's is that like a prediction for the election?
The exit poll at 10 o'clock at night, light up the Christmas tree.
It's so
red
bad.
landslide.
It's a bit of a shame, isn't it?
It really is. It really is.
And it's